I am 28 years old, a woman who has always tried to be the quiet foundation of my family. My brother Leo is the one who shines. He is the sun, and I have always been the planet that orbits him, content to be in his light without needing to be the source of it. Our parents, in their own loving way, encouraged this dynamic. Leo was the one with the big ideas, the grand gestures. I was the one with the steady job, the savings account, the sensible car. I was reliable. He was remarkable. And for the most part, I was fine with that. It was the role I knew how to play. The night of my parents' 40th wedding anniversary party was no different. The rented hall was filled with friends and family, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Leo and his wife, Amelia, were working the room, charming everyone they spoke to. I was near the back, making sure our elderly Aunt Carol had a comfortable chair and a glass of water. It was what I did. I managed the small, unseen details so that the big, shiny event could run smoothly. My father, David, tapped the side of his champagne flute with a spoon. The room quieted down. He stood next to my mother, Sarah, his arm wrapped tightly around her waist. They looked happy, a portrait of a long and successful marriage. I felt a swell of affection for them. They had built a good life. "Thank you all for coming," my father began, his voice warm and steady. 40 years. I can hardly believe it. 40 years with this incredible woman. He smiled at my mother, and she blushed like a young girl. He spoke about their life together, the ups and the downs, the lessons they learned. It was a lovely, heartfelt speech. I saw Leo raise his glass from across the room, a proud smile on his face. He caught my eye and winked. I smiled back. In moments like these, we were just a family, celebrating a milestone. Then, my father's speech took a strange turn. He cleared his throat and his expression became more serious. "Sarah and I have been thinking a lot about the future lately," he said. "About our legacy. About our children." My stomach tightened just a little. Family speeches about legacy usually involved Leo and his burgeoning business empire. My father often spoke with immense pride about Leo. One, the responsible one. The one who has never asked for a thing, but has always been there, steady as a rock. I could feel dozens of pairs of eyes on me. I gave a small, awkward wave. This was intensely uncomfortable. I wished he would stop. "We've been thinking about what's fair," my dad said, his voice ringing with a strange finality. "And we've come to a decision." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. He raised his glass high. "So I want to propose a toast. To our daughter, Clara. She has been so responsible, so careful, so trustworthy. We've realized that she deserves all the money we have." The silence in the room was no longer respectful. It was stunned. A few people coughed. Someone dropped a fork and it clattered loudly on the floor. My mind went completely blank. All the money? What did that even mean? It sounded like a line from a bad movie. It was absurd. It was embarrassing. I risked a glance at Leo. His face, which had been glowing with pride just moments before, was now a mask of disbelief. The color had drained from his cheeks, leaving him looking sickly under the warm lights of the hall. He went pale. Not just a little bit pale. He was as white as a sheet. His smile was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed stare. His eyes were wide, fixed on our father. He looked like he had been struck by lightning. Amelia looked just as shocked. Her hand, which had been on Leo's arm, had fallen to her side. She was staring at my parents, then at Leo, then at me, her mouth slightly agape. My father, seemingly oblivious to the shockwave he had just sent through the room, continued. "She will be the steward of our future. We trust her completely. To Clara." A few people, mostly close family, hesitantly raised their glasses and murmured, "To Clara." The rest of the guests looked around, confused, unsure of the proper etiquette for such a bizarre and deeply personal family announcement. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. My parents had just aired something intensely private in front of 100 people, and they had done it in the most dramatic way possible. I felt a surge of anger, quickly followed by a wave of confusion. Why would they do this? Why now? My mother entirely. Something that would change everything. I spent the rest of the party on autopilot. I accepted congratulations from people who clearly had no idea what they were congratulating me for. I smiled until my cheeks ached. I made small talk while my mind raced. The weight of the box, which I had placed under my table, felt like an anchor, holding me in a sea of confusion. Leo and Amelia avoided me for the rest of the evening. I saw them in a corner, their heads close together, whispering urgently. Every so often, Leo would glance over at me, his expression a mixture of anger and something else I couldn't quite decipher. It looked almost like fear. Why would he be afraid of me? Driving home, the box sat on the passenger seat next to me. It seemed to fill the car with a silent, pulsing energy. I replayed my father's words over and over in my head. She deserves all the money. It was such a clumsy, brutal phrase. It was designed to cause a reaction. And it had certainly worked on Leo. I had never been a materialistic person. Money, for me, was about security. It was about having a safety net. For Leo, it was different. Money was a measure of success. It was fuel for his ambitions. It was a way to keep score. For our parents to publicly declare that I, the sensible, boring daughter, was more deserving of their wealth than him, the brilliant, visionary son, was a direct assault on his identity. I got back to my small, quiet apartment and placed the box on my kitchen table. For a long time, I just stared at it. I was almost afraid to open it. Whatever was inside had the power to detonate our family. My hands trembled slightly as I untied the ribbon and carefully tore off the wrapping paper. It was a simple, sturdy document box, the kind you use for storing important papers. I lifted the lid. There was no tissue paper, no celebratory filler. It was packed to the brim with files, folders, and binders. On the very top was a single sealed envelope with my name written on it in my mother's elegant handwriting. My heart was pounding in my chest. This confirmed it. This was not a gift. This was a handover. A transfer of responsibility so abrupt and so public that it could only wanted to simplify their lives. It was all couched in the gentle language of retirement planning, but there was an undercurrent of panic to their words. Then I got to the part that mattered. "We have had some concerns about Leo's recent ventures," my mother had written. "He is so ambitious, which is a wonderful quality, but sometimes his reach exceeds his grasp. We worry that he has become overextended." Overextended. It was such a mild word for what I was beginning to suspect. The letter went on to explain what they had done. They had consulted a lawyer. They had restructured their assets. Everything. The house, the savings, the investment portfolio had been placed into a trust. And I, Clara, was the sole trustee. Effective immediately. They had given me complete legal control over their entire net worth. The letter ended with another apology. "We are sorry to do this to you so suddenly and so publicly. We hoped that by making a grand gesture, we could make it clear to everyone that the decision is final. We hope you understand. We trust you to do the right thing." I put the letter down, my mind reeling. They had not just given me control. They had used me. They had used my reputation for being responsible as a shield. The public toast was not about honoring me. It was about creating a fortress around their money. A fortress with my face on it, to keep my brother out. They were too weak or too scared to say no to him themselves, so they had nominated me to do it for them. A cold fury began to build inside me. Fury at my parents for their cowardice, for dropping this immense burden on me without a single word of warning. And a deeper, colder fury at my brother. What had he done? What kind of trouble was he in that had terrified our parents into taking such a drastic, desperate measure? I turned my attention back to the box. It was time to find out. I pulled out the first binder. It was labeled Bank Statements. I opened it to the most recent month. I saw the usual entries: pension deposits, Social Security payments, withdrawals for groceries, the electric bill. It all looked normal, mundane. But then I saw it. A wire transfer. A very large one. For $50,000. It was dated just. Stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the city lights. The quiet life I had built for myself, the peaceful orbit I had maintained, was over. I had been pulled into the chaotic, fiery center of my family's hidden drama. My parents had given me the power, but also the responsibility. I had to protect them. But to do that, I would have to confront my brother. I would have to uncover the full extent of his lies. The path forward was clear, but it was not easy. I had to understand everything. I had to get answers. My first step would be to talk to my mother. I needed to hear it from her. I needed to understand the fear that had led them to this point. I picked up my phone. It was late, but I did not care. The time for being quiet and polite was over. My finger hovered over her contact name. I took a deep breath and pressed the call button. The game had changed, and whether I liked it or not, I was now a player. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Clara? Is everything all right, dear?" "No, Mom," I said, my voice flat and cold. "Nothing is all right. We need to talk about the gift." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, a little shaky now. "Can this wait until the morning, sweetheart? It's been a long night." "It's waited long enough," I said, my patience gone. "I have the box. I've read your letter. I've seen the bank statements. I want you to tell me what's going on. I want you to tell me about Apex Holdings." Another silence. This one was heavier, filled with shame. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Oh, Clara, I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't good enough," I replied, the anger rising in my voice. "You've put me in an impossible position. You need to tell me everything. Right now." I could hear my father in the background, his voice a low grumble. "Sarah, who is it?" "It's Clara," my mother said, her voice trembling. "She knows." That was all I needed to hear. They had been hiding this. They had been living in fear. My resolve hardened. I was no longer just confused or angry. I was determined. I would get to the bottom of this no matter what it took. I would protect my parents, even from my own brother. The family them into the living room. The house was immaculate, as always, but it felt different, tense. I sat down on the sofa, the same sofa where I had sat for countless family gatherings, and placed the document box on the coffee table between us. The thud it made seemed to echo in the silent room. "I want you to walk me through this," I said, my voice calm but firm. I opened the box and took out the binder of bank statements. "Let's start here. $320,000 in 6 months. To Leo's company." My father sighed, a long, ragged sound, and sank into his armchair. "It's his business, Clara," he said, his voice weak. "He needed capital. He was on the verge of a major breakthrough. A major breakthrough that required you to liquidate half of your retirement savings?" I asked, my gaze unwavering. My mother started to cry softly. "He told us it was an investment, Clara. A loan. He promised he would pay it all back, with interest, as soon as the big deal closed." "What big deal?" I pressed. "Did you see any contracts? Any paperwork? Or did you just take his word for it?" My parents exchanged a guilty look. They didn't have to answer. I already knew. They had taken his word for it. They had always taken his word for it. Leo could sell snow in a blizzard. His charisma was his greatest weapon, and he had been using it on our parents for years. "He was so convincing," my mother whispered, wringing her hands. "He showed us projections, charts. It all looked so professional. He said he didn't want to go to the banks because they would take too much equity. He said keeping it in the family was better for everyone." "Better for him, you mean," I said sharply. "You weren't investing. You were funding his lifestyle. You were enabling him." "That's not fair, Clara," my father interjected, a flash of his old authority returning. "He's our son. You're supposed to help your children." "You helped me by teaching me to be responsible," I shot back. "You taught me to save, to live within my means. What did you teach him? That if he fails, you'll always be there to write another check?" The accusation hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. My father looked away, his face a mask of shame. Why did it come to this? I asked, my voice softening slightly. Why the big using their love for him and his family as a weapon? A wave of disgust washed over me. So you panicked, I said, piecing it together. You were afraid he would bully you into giving him the rest. So you went to a lawyer and put everything in my name. You made me the bad guy. You made me the one who has to say no. We didn't know what else to do, my mother sobbed. We were scared, Clara. We were so scared. I looked at my parents, huddled together on their sofa, looking small and defeated. My anger began to fade, replaced by a profound sadness. They were not malicious. They were just weak. They loved their son so much that they had allowed him to nearly ruin them, and in their desperation, they had thrown me into the fire. I'll handle it, I said, my voice filled with a resolve I didn't know I possessed. I will protect what's left. But you have to promise me something. No more secrets. No more giving him money behind my back. From now on, I am in charge of the finances. Completely. Do you agree? My father looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and relief. He nodded slowly. We agree, Clara. We trust you. Good, I said, standing up. Because the first thing I'm going to do is call your son and have a little chat. I left the box of documents with them. I didn't need it anymore. I had all the information I needed. As I drove away, I saw my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired, but my eyes were clear and focused. The person I had been yesterday, the quiet daughter who stayed in the background, was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone who was about to have a very difficult conversation with her golden boy brother. I decided not to call him right away. A phone call was too easy for him to dismiss, to lie his way out of. I needed to see his face. I drove to his office, a sleek, modern space in a trendy downtown building. The rent alone must have been astronomical. My parents' retirement money had paid for this. The receptionist, a young woman with a professionally friendly smile, greeted me. Can I help you? I'm here to see Leo, I said. I'm his sister, Clara. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She had probably heard about the drama at the party. News travels fast in families. I'm sorry. Call Clara, he said, his voice tight. What are you doing here? You can't just barge in. We need to talk, Leo, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I walked over to the visitors' chairs and sat down, crossing my legs. I was not going to let him intimidate me. Not in his fancy office, paid for by our parents' fear. I'm very busy, he said, shuffling some papers on his desk, avoiding my eyes. Whatever it is, it can wait. No, it can't, I replied. I've just come from Mom and Dad's house. We had a long talk. About you. About your business. About Apex Holdings. At the mention of the company name, he flinched. He finally looked at me, and for the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. The charming, confident mask was gone. I was looking at the real Leo, and he was terrified. I don't know what they told you, he began, trying to regain his composure. But they don't understand the complexities of my business. Oh, I think they understand perfectly, I said, leaning forward. They understand that you've taken over $300,000 from them. They understand that you pressured them, that you emotionally blackmailed them when they tried to say no. And I understand it too. He stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You have no right, he hissed, his voice low and furious. This is between me and them. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me now, I said, my voice rising to match his. They made it my business when they put me in charge of everything. The money you think is yours to play with? It's not. It's mine to manage, and I'm telling you the bank is closed. You are not getting another dime. His face contorted with rage. You can't do that, he snarled. I need that money. The $200,000. My entire company depends on it. Then your company is in bigger trouble than I thought, I said coldly. And it's not my problem. It's yours. You built this mess, Leo. You can figure out how to get out of it. But you will not do it by destroying our parents' future. We stared at each other across the expensive desk, a chasm of lies and betrayal between us. The brother I had once looked up to was gone. In his place, tense silence fell over the family. Leo and I were not speaking. My parents called me every day. their conversations a nervous mix of gratitude and anxiety. "Have you heard from him?" my mother would ask, her voice hushed. "Is he all right?" "He's a grown man, Mom," I would reply, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "He'll be fine. He just needs to learn to stand on his own 2 feet." But I knew it was not that simple. Leo was not the type to give up easily. He was used to getting his way. I spent my evenings poring over the documents my parents had given me. I organized everything, creating spreadsheets, tracking every dollar that had gone to Leo's company. I was building a case, not for a court of law, but for the court of family opinion. I needed to be prepared for his next move. I also made an appointment with Mr. Gable, my parents' longtime financial advisor. I needed a professional opinion. I needed to understand just how bad the damage was. Mr. Gable's office was the opposite of Leo's. It was old, cluttered, and comfortable. He was a kind, grandfatherly man who had known me since I was a child. "Clara," he said, shaking my hand warmly, "your parents told me you'd be calling. I have to say, I'm relieved they finally brought you into this." "So you knew?" I asked, sitting down. "You knew Leo was taking their money?" He sighed, polishing his glasses with a handkerchief. "I advised against it. Strongly. I told David that liquidating his retirement funds to pour into an unproven startup was incredibly risky, but he wouldn't listen. Leo had him convinced this was the next big thing." "How bad is it, Mr. Gable?" I asked, getting straight to the point. He pulled out a thick file. "Financially, they're not destitute, but they're not comfortable either. The money Leo took represents about 40% of their nest egg. If they're careful, and if the market is kind, they'll have enough to live on. But their dream of traveling, of leaving a substantial inheritance, that's gone. Leo spent it." The words hit me like a physical blow. 40%. He had gambled away nearly half of their life savings on his own vanity project. "What do you know about his company, Apex Holdings?" I asked. "Me." "One more thing, Clara," he said, his tone serious. "I ran a standard credit check on your parents when they started making these large withdrawals. I was concerned. I found something odd. A few months ago, a new credit card was opened in your father's name. It has a very high limit, and it's been maxed out." "What?" I asked, stunned. "My father is meticulous about his credit. He wouldn't do that." "I agree," Mr. Gable said, handing me a printout. "The charges are not his usual pattern. They're for expensive dinners, designer clothes, luxury travel. It looks more like, well, it looks more like your brother's lifestyle." A cold dread washed over me. "Are you saying Leo opened a credit card in Dad's name?" "I can't say for certain," he said carefully. "But the billing address for the card is not your parents' house. It's a P.O. box in the city. You might want to look into it." I took the paper, my hands shaking with rage. This was worse than I could have imagined. It was not just manipulation anymore. It was fraud. It was a crime. I went home and spent hours on the internet, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I was no longer just an amateur detective. I was a woman on a mission. I started with a simple search for Apex Holdings LLC. The company website was slick and professional, full of corporate jargon about synergistic solutions and paradigm-shifting innovation. It said nothing about what the company actually did. I dug deeper. I looked up the company's registration documents on the state's official website. It was registered to Leo, as expected. But there were other names listed as officers. I searched for those names. One of them had a history of involvement with companies that had gone bankrupt, leaving investors with nothing. Another had been investigated for securities fraud, though never charged. Leo was in business with shady characters. Then, I turned my attention to the credit card. I used the information Mr. Gable had given me to access the account online. It was shockingly easy. The security questions were things like, "What was your mother's maiden name?" and "What was the name of your first pet?" Leo knew all the answers. The statement, a charity auction held a few months ago. The article mentioned several high-profile attendees, including local entrepreneur Leo, and it featured a photo of him and Amelia, smiling for the camera. In the background of the photo, partially obscured, was a logo. It was the logo of the storage company. My mind started to connect the dots. The shady business partners, the failing company, the massive, unexplained spending, the storage unit. It did not paint a picture of a successful businessman. It painted a picture of someone who was hiding something, someone who was preparing to run. I knew I had to find out what was in that storage unit. But how? I couldn't just walk in and ask for the key. Then I had an idea. It was a long shot, a gamble. But I was done playing by the rules. Leo had started this war, and I was going to finish it. I looked at the credit card statement again. The car dealership where he had made the down payment for Amelia's new car. I called them. "Hello," I said, putting on my most pleasant, helpful voice. "My name is Clara. My brother Leo recently purchased a car from you for his wife. I'm helping him with some paperwork, and I seem to have misplaced the bill of sale. Would it be possible for you to email me a copy?" "I'm not sure if I can do that, ma'am," the salesman said. "Privacy policies, you know." "Oh, of course," I said, thinking fast. "I completely understand. It's just that it's a surprise for my father. We're trying to prove to him that Leo is doing well, and having the official paperwork for such a lovely car would really help. Our father's name is David." I held my breath. It was a shameless piece of manipulation, using the very family dynamics Leo had exploited. There was a pause. "David, you say?" the salesman asked. "I see a note here. The financing was co-signed by a David. Is that him?" My heart leaped. "Yes, that's him," I said, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. Leo had not just used our father's credit card, he had used him as a co-signer on a car loan. The man's audacity was breathtaking. "All right," the salesman said, his tone friendlier now. "Since he's on the loan, I suppose it's okay. What's your email address?" I gave him my address, and a few minutes later, the document arrived in my inbox. With proof of his deception, his fraud, and his utter contempt for the family that had given him everything. The quiet daughter was about to become the avenging angel, and my brother had no idea what was coming for him. I decided a direct assault on the storage unit was too risky. I needed a more subtle approach. I needed a witness, and I knew just who to call. Aunt Carol had always been the family's neutral observer. She was my father's sister, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had seen it all. She loved both Leo and me, but she was not blind to our faults. If I was going to make a move this bold, I needed someone on my side who could not be accused of bias. I called her. "Aunt Carol," I said, "I need your help. It's about Leo." "I figured I'd be getting this call sooner or later," she said, her voice grim. "That toast at the party was the talk of the family. What has that boy done now?" I spent the next hour laying it all out for her. The secret loans, the failing business, the emotional blackmail, the credit card fraud. I told her everything. She listened patiently, interrupting only to ask sharp, insightful questions. When I was finished, there was a long silence on the line. "That fool," she finally said, her voice a mixture of anger and sadness. "That arrogant, selfish fool. I always knew he was too slick for his own good." "It's worse than that," I said. "I think he's hiding something. Something big. I found the location of a storage unit he's been renting. I need to get inside. And I need you to come with me." "Clara, that sounds dangerous," she said, her concern evident. "What if he's involved in something illegal?" "That's what I need to find out," I replied. "I'm not going to let him ruin our parents' lives. But I can't do it alone. I need someone there with me, someone who can back me up when I tell Mom and Dad what I've found." There was another pause. I could hear her thinking. "All right," she said finally, her voice firm. "I'm in. What's the plan?" My plan was simple, but it required a bit of acting. The next day, Aunt Carol and I drove to the storage facility. It was a large, impersonal place on the industrial outskirts of the city. We walked into the office. Against policy. "Oh, I know," I said, dabbing at my eyes with a tissue. "But I have the key right here." I held up my own set of house keys, jangling them pitifully. He gave it to me this morning, but I'm so flustered I can't remember the unit number, and with him not answering his phone, I'm just imagining the worst. Aunt Carol stepped forward, playing her part beautifully. "Please, sir," she said, her voice quavering. "My son is a good boy, but he's been under so much stress lately with his business. We're just so worried. If you could just look up the unit number for us, we'd be so grateful." The manager hesitated. He looked from my tear-streaked face to Aunt Carol's worried expression. He was a man, not a machine, and we were playing on his basic human decency. He sighed. All right. Don't get worked up. What's the name again?" "Leo," I said, "and his co-signer is David." I added my father's name to add legitimacy. He typed the names into his computer. "Unit 34B, he said. "It's on the second floor." "Thank you," I said, giving him my most grateful smile. "Thank you so much. You've been a great help." We walked out of the office, my heart pounding. "You're a better actress than I thought," Aunt Carol whispered as we headed for the elevator. "Desperate times," I whispered back. We found Unit 34B. It was secured with a heavy-duty padlock. My brilliant plan had a flaw. I had the unit number, but I had no way to get inside. "Now what?" Aunt Carol asked. I looked at the lock. Then I looked at the security camera mounted on the ceiling down the hall. An idea, a much riskier one, began to form in my mind. "We're going to have to come back," I said, "and we're going to need a pair of bolt cutters." "Clara!" Aunt Carol hissed. "That's breaking and entering." "No," I said, my mind racing. "It's accessing a property that was paid for with stolen money. My father's money. Technically, he's the victim here, and I am acting as his agent." It was a flimsy legal argument, but it was all I had. "This is insane," she said, shaking her head. "It's the only way," I insisted. Furniture or forgotten belongings. It was filled with boxes. Dozens and dozens of brand new, neatly packed cardboard boxes. And they were all labeled. Not with handwritten scrawls, but with professional printed labels from a shipping company. I walked closer and read the label on the nearest box. 2. Apex Holdings International. Cayman Islands. My blood ran cold. The Cayman Islands. A notorious tax haven. A place where people went to hide money. I took out my pocket knife and sliced open the tape on the box. Inside, nestled in packing peanuts, were stacks of documents. Financial records, invoices, client lists. It was the entire administrative backbone of his company. I opened another box. This one was filled with computer hard drives, all carefully wrapped in anti-static bags. The company's digital records. He was not just storing things. He was preparing to ship his entire operation offshore. He was planning to flee the country. And then I saw it. Tucked away in the back corner of the unit, a small, heavy safe. I had no way of opening it, but I didn't need to. I knew what had to be inside. It was the cash. The hard currency he had been systematically draining from our parents, converted into a form that was untraceable, ready to be moved. He was not just a failed businessman. He was a con artist. He had been planning this all along. The investments, the loans, it was all a scam to build up a nest egg for his escape. He was going to take our parents' money, abandon his company and his investors, and disappear. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. He was not just going to ruin our parents, he was going to get away with it. I backed out of the unit, my mind a whirlwind of shock and fury. I closed the door, trying to make it look as undisturbed as possible. "What did you find?" Aunt Carol asked, her voice a nervous whisper. "The truth," I said, my voice shaking. "He's a thief, a common thief, and he's planning to run." We drove home in silence. The evidence I had uncovered was overwhelming, but it was also dangerous. This was no longer a simple family dispute over money. This was a criminal conspiracy. I knew I could not go to the police, not yet. It would destroy my parents. The public shame. Documents from the storage unit. The shipping labels to the Cayman Islands. The list of his shady business partners. I printed out the credit card statements showing his lavish spending. I even took a photo of the locked safe with my phone. I put everything into a large manila envelope. This was my ammunition. The night of the dinner, the atmosphere at my parents' house was thick with unspoken tension. Leo and Amelia arrived last. They were putting on a brave face, acting as if nothing was wrong. Leo even brought my mother a bouquet of flowers. The hypocrisy was nauseating. We sat down at the dining table. My father tried to make small talk about the weather. My mother kept fussing over the food, her hands trembling. Aunt Carol sat silently, watching everyone with her sharp, intelligent eyes. I waited until everyone had been served. Then, I cleared my throat. "I'm glad we're all here together," I said, my voice calm and even, "because there are some things we need to discuss as a family." Leo shot me a warning look. "Clara, this is not the time or the place." "I think it's the perfect time and place," I replied, my gaze not wavering. I reached down and placed the manila envelope on the table. "I have some questions for you, Leo, and I think Mom, Dad, and Amelia deserve to hear the answers." Amelia jumped to his defense immediately. "What is this, Clara? Another one of your attacks? You've been jealous of Leo's success your entire life." "His success?" I asked, a humorless smile touching my lips. "Is that what you call it? Let's talk about his success." I opened the envelope and pulled out the first document. It was a copy of his company's balance sheet, which I had found in the storage unit. It was a sea of red ink. "This is the financial statement for Apex Holdings," I announced to the table. "It shows that the company is insolvent. It has been for over a year. It's drowning in debt." Leo's face went white. "Where did you get that?" he stammered. "That's not important," I said, pushing the document towards the center of the table. "What's important is that you've been lying to everyone. Your business is not on the verge of a breakthrough. It's on the verge of collapse." I looked at my parents. Their faces were etched with confusion and dawning horror. "You really think you could afford that car, Amelia, on the salary of a CEO of a failing company?" She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. The truth was dawning on her too. She had been a willing participant in the lie, enjoying the benefits without asking any questions. Finally, I pulled out the last piece of evidence, the photo of the safe and the shipping label addressed to the Cayman Islands. "This is the part that I'm sure you'll all find most interesting," I said, my voice dripping with ice. "This is Leo's exit plan." I laid the photo on the table. Leo hasn't just been lying to you. He's been robbing you. He's been systematically draining Mom and Dad's accounts, converting the money to cash, and storing it in a safe. And when he's taken enough, he plans to ship his company records and his stolen money to an offshore account and disappear. He's going to leave you all behind to deal with the fallout. The bankruptcy, the lawsuits, the shame. The room was utterly silent. The only sound was my mother's soft, heartbroken sobs. My father stared at the evidence on the table, his face ashen. He looked at his son, the golden boy, the one he had believed in, had sacrificed for, and for the first time, he saw him for what he truly was: a fraud, a thief, a coward. "Leo," my father said, his voice a hoarse whisper, "is this true?" Leo looked around the table, his eyes darting from face to face, looking for an escape, an ally. He found none. His wife was staring at him with horrified betrayal. His aunt was looking at him with cold contempt. His parents were looking at him with shattered love. And I was looking at him with righteous fury. He was trapped. The walls of his lies had come crashing down around him. He finally broke. He slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. "I didn't know what else to do," he mumbled. "Everything was falling apart. I just needed a way out." "A way out?" my father roared, slamming his fist on the table, the plates and glasses rattling. "You call this a way out? Betraying your family? Stealing from your own mother and father? You are a disgrace." The confrontation I had planned was happening. The truth was out. But watching my family implode was actions. You will face your investors. You will declare bankruptcy. You will sell your fancy house and your new car. You will pay back every person you have wronged, no matter how long it takes. And if I don't? He asked, a hint of his old defiance returning. I leaned across the table, my eyes boring into his. If you don't, I will take this envelope to the police, and I will testify against my own brother. I will tell them about the fraud, the theft, the plan to flee the country, and I will make sure you spend the next 10 years in a place where your charm and your charisma won't do you any good. The choice is yours, Leo. The threat hung in the air, heavy and absolute. He stared at me, searching for a bluff, for any sign of weakness. He found none. He had underestimated me his entire life. He had seen me as the quiet, passive sister. He had never seen the steel underneath. Now he did, and it terrified him. He sagged, defeated. "All right, Clara," he said, his voice barely audible. "You win." The days that followed the disastrous family dinner were a blur of difficult, painful actions. True to my word, I forced Leo to face the music. The first step was retrieving the money. I did not trust him to go to the storage unit alone. I insisted that my father and I go with him. The car ride was silent and agonizingly tense. Leo stared out the window, his face a grim mask. My father sat in the back, his expression one of deep, weary disappointment. At the storage facility, Leo used his key to open the unit. Standing in front of the boxes and the safe, the reality of his betrayal seemed to hit my father all at once. He put a hand on the wall to steady himself. "How could you, Leo?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "How could you do this to us?" Leo did not answer. He knelt and began to work the combination on the safe. After a moment, the heavy door swung open. Inside were neat, plastic-wrapped bundles of cash. It was a shocking amount of money. My father gasped. I had brought a duffel bag. "Put it all in here," I commanded. Silently, Leo transferred the money from the safe to the bag. It was heavy, a physical burden representing telling my parents the full extent of the financial damage. With Mr. Gable's help, we went through everything. The money from the safe covered what Leo had taken from their savings, but there were other debts. The maxed-out credit card, the car loan he had tricked my father into co-signing. My parents would not be destitute, but their financial security was permanently damaged. They would have to live a much more frugal life than they had planned. This was, perhaps, the most painful consequence of all. Leo's life, as he knew it, fell apart. His investors, furious at his deception, filed a lawsuit. He was forced to declare personal bankruptcy. He and Amelia sold their house and moved into a small, cramped apartment. The golden boy had fallen, and he had fallen hard. I spoke with my parents a few weeks after the dinner. We were sitting in their living room, the same room where I had first confronted them. The atmosphere was different now. The tension was gone, replaced by a quiet, somber acceptance. "I'm sorry, Clara," my mother said, her eyes filling with tears. "We put you through so much. We should have been stronger. We were fools," my father added, his voice heavy with regret. "We were so blinded by our pride in him. We refused to see what was right in front of our faces." "We all made mistakes," I said gently. "The important thing is that we're dealing with it now. As a family, I had taken full control of their finances. I had set up a strict budget for them. I had moved their remaining investments into safe, low-risk funds. I was the steward of their future, just as my father had declared in his toast, but it was not an honor. It was a heavy, necessary burden. I also had a conversation with Aunt Carol. She had been my rock through the whole ordeal. "You were very brave, Clara," she told me over a cup of tea. "You did what no one else had the courage to do." "I was just angry," I confessed. "I couldn't let him get away with it." "It was more than anger," she said, her wise eyes studying me. "It was strength. You found your voice. Don't ever lose it again." My final interaction with Leo was a phone call. He called me a few months later. His voice was different. The arrogance, the charm, it was all gone. He sounded tired. I just wanted to. The first time, we were living in the truth. And that was a start. Life settled into a new normal. My relationship with my parents became deeper, more honest. They no longer treated me as the reliable background character. They saw me as an equal, as a partner in rebuilding their lives. Leo and Amelia struggled. They were forced to live a life without the safety net of our parents' money. It was a harsh reality for them, but a necessary one. They were finally learning the lessons of responsibility that I had learned long ago. Sometimes, I think back to that anniversary party. The toast that felt like a betrayal. The heavy gift box that changed everything. My parents' toast was not an honor. It was a desperate cry for help. And my brother did not go pale because he was losing a future inheritance. He went pale because he was losing control. He had built his entire life on a foundation of lies, and he knew in that moment that the walls were about to come tumbling down. He just never imagined that I would be the one to push them over. I stopped being the quiet one, and in doing so, I saved my family from the person they loved the most. The silence was broken, and in its place, we began to build something new, something real.